let's move into the first draft by TSM. So FlyQuest opens with Senna ban. TSM responds with Ornn ban. Okay, so the Ornn ban, fine. It's sort of whatever. I think that champions that answer Ornn are basically ones that can answer to his engage that isn't like limiting you by forcing you into Braum or forcing you into Yasuo or things like that. Like for instance, I think Kindred's really good. I think champions that stand their ground or invite the opponents in, that make it really hard for Ornn's teammates to actually follow up on his engage. There's a lot of themes there that are really good. But anyways, the Ornn ban comes in, and now Tahm Kench is banned away by FlyQuest. You guys already know my thoughts on this. Tahm isn't really a ban-worthy champion if opponents are really good at drafting in specific ways. What does Tahm Kench actually hate? Tahm Kench hates poke. So if one team composition has a lot of poke, but they also have disengage, so you're thinking of like Azir, you're thinking of like a mid-rangey jungler, you're thinking of an AD carry that has like self-peel, like Ezreal. If you're thinking of stuff like that, all of a sudden Tahm Kench becomes very weak. You should interview the Tahm Kench player after the game. And then the Tahm Kench player will probably say, I felt like I couldn't fucking do anything. The thing about Tahm Kench banning it away on blue is that, yes, it is on red side, so they would have counter pick available, so if something is there that allows Tahm to be good, then I guess whatever. Then they ban away Set. So I know that a lot of people have different opinions on Set. I know, like when we've had Nemesis and Whippo on stream and whatnot, and I'm just referencing them because people love to use fucking appeal to authority. I personally fucking hate it, but if you want to go down that route, then we can use this. The champion is beatable in draft. There's ways to neuter Set in the draft phase. Now, if you don't have those options available to you due to champion pool limitations, well, then you're talking about something that's happening outside of the game. As it stands, Set is probably fine here, if those variables aren't considered, but I do want to point out that Set, in theory, isn't a necessary ban if you can properly draft against it. And so we'll go from there. Kalista ends up getting banned away on blue side by FlyQuest, which is fine. She's a multi-flex champion, mid-top and AD, but Kalista does have a theme. She's very red in nature, and you should be able to like extrapolate maybe at this point what I'm referring to as red. Red generally has like an aggressive tendency, has to go in, very engagey, yada yada yada. Syndra gets banned away on red side. Now the Syndra ban away on red side is interesting, and I say this because Syndra is generally able to come in on R3 pretty safely. She's also R2able, and she can also come in on R5 and R4 pretty well. And the reason that Syndra has like a lot of spots here inside of the pick order is because she's a really good champion against a lot of team compositions, given that she has multiple modes. She has obviously a shitload of control inside of her kit. She outright wins a lot of laning phases. Even counter picks aren't really counter picks against her. She has flex potency between mid and AD, but most ADs can't actually play her. But it is important to note that Syndra is very powerful against some of the strong ADs down in bot lane. Like, she ruins Aphelios if you're playing it correctly. She's really good against Senna if you're playing it correctly. If you have the ability to play like double AP in bot lane with AD jungler, AD top laner or something, and then you know, it doesn't even have to be AD or AP in mid, or I mean, it can be AP or AD in mid. Stuff like that gets very creative with Syndra. So the Syndra ban away leaves open Aphelios. And the thing that the Syndra ban away for me, or the reason that I don't like the Syndra ban away for me is because there's so many options for Syndra, and if she's picked early, you can draft around her, which is what the red team wants to do. So the reason that she's stronger on red than I think that she is on blue, at least early on blue, is because Syndra hates tanky team compositions. Syndra hates mid-rangey team comps, because when mid-rangey team comps or tanky team compositions end up getting drafted, Syndra tends to get stuck on 2.5 items. And what I mean by Syndra tends to get stuck on 2.5 items is because her items are either going to be really expensive off the get-go, because Oblivion Orb is going to have less potency as a second item to just be sitting on, if the opponent's team composition is very durable. And then if you can't find time to get to a third item, then oftentimes you'll end up upgrading Morello for no reason, and then you get stuck. Because then you are anywhere from 6 to 8 minutes away from another core item completion. And if that's happening in the mid-game, then you really stifle yourself. So there's a lot of champions that can answer her, and red side is obviously really good at that. So I don't like the Syndra ban. Nonetheless, Rakan's picked up first. Okay, so here's the thing. Rakan is red and white as a champion. Rakan, white being that he's very versatile. He's able to do a lot of things. He does have alternate modes, but a lot of them are very weaker than his initial mode. And what his initial mode is I must go in. So no matter what, Rakan doesn't have the ability to peel back or be defensive or do anything in the same way that maybe a champion like Braum or Alistar or other like peeler supports like Nautilus and whatnot. He suffers that controlling from a defensive aspect like other champions. Now, what he is really good at is he is going in, he's good at having mix-ups, he's good at being very flexible, being very mobile, etc. Doesn't change the fact that his overarching theme means in. It just, no matter how you want to fucking say it, it's just in. So now, already off the bat, the red team can assess and they can identify that, okay, Rakan has to go in. And so because Rakan is going in, it most likely means that Rakan will be paired with other champions that go in. So from the get-go, we can select champions that are really good at either fighting against champs that go in, or we can have disengagey kind of pokey things going on for us, and we can identify it like that, because the blue team has already showed us a theme, and either they will commit to that theme, or they will self-harm their own Rakan pick by not committing to the theme. That's a problem. So League is, there's a lot of diversity inside the game. So like right here, you could do champions that have multiple modes. So if you were TSM or something, you could just go Gragas Gangplank, and that would be totally fine. You can reserve the R3. And the reason that you want to reserve the R3 here is because there's a chance that FlyQuest would do something like Xayah on B2. So if they do commit to Xayah Rakan B2, perfect. We could do something like Draven. We can do any sort of lane bully 80 carry that shits on Xayah Rakan's throat, and then also counterpick reserve for R5. Because there's a lot of bot lane combos that can beat Xayah Rakan. We now also know that Rakan's going to drag Xayah along for the ride, and Xayah is also going to have to go in. So as long as we choose like ultimates and champions that are very disengagey and outrange the Xayah Rakan, we can neuter her the same way that we wanted to initially neuter Rakan. Gangplank's achieving that, Gragas is achieving it, very stationary, very flexible, and how they want to play out the game. If the Gragas and the Gangplank be ahead, they can also be very suffocating. If they fall behind, they can stall very well. There's a lot of things that these two champions' themes have going for them against the theme of Xayah Rakan, and it doesn't matter. Bot laners will always say, oh, Xayah Rakan's a really, really strong bot lane duo, and then they'll lose to something and they'll be like, we can't pick Xayah Rakan into this. Or, the other side of the coin is that if you handed another professional bot lane a winning lane against Xayah Rakan, they would never say Xayah Rakan beats it. And that's what I was referring to earlier, when you have to get a pro player to play both sides of the coin. You have to ask them what they would really think, and sometimes you have to do it maybe not immediately after each other. Maybe you have to come back to it later on so that there's not some sort of like a recency bias. And that way you can get an honest answer. So stuff like Draven on R3 all of a sudden creates a lot of problems, right? Now, we don't even know what the B3 is going to be. So let's say that we didn't go get, well, the Gangplank would have prevented the Gangplank pick right there, but you know, things are interesting already. So you could do other sorts of stuff as it is. If you're fine with playing like Azir blind, you could also Azir here, and Azir would be completely fine as it does currently stand. If they end up picking up like the GP or something like that, well, now you know that the Gangplank creates like a window for the engage of Xayah Rakan, but the GP is going to be potentially susceptible. Now, this draft is with the Azir, it's a little bit weird. Personally, I don't like Azir on R2. I like waiting for more information before Azir comes in, because Azir is a trap champion. Sometimes you can just use him on B3 when you have more information privy to you, or B2, B3, doesn't really matter. You're just waiting for more information. I think that there's still ways to pivot away against the Azir and the Gragas on B4, B5, so I don't really like it there. But let's just go into TSM's draft as it stands. So I just wanted to talk about those points. So they end up going Aphelios, and then they go Aatrox. And here's the problem with the Aatrox. Even though you know that Rakan is going to be going into you, even though you know that Rakan has a red theme too, even though you know that Rakan is probably going to get paired with Xayah, even though you know that maybe they'll continue drafting champs like this, it doesn't necessarily mean that Aatrox gets rewarded. Because it's very easy to respond to Aatrox on B3 with a counter champion. It's very easy to respond to Aatrox on B4, B5 because there's too many champions that exist. So actually, Aatrox in this game does get responded to, because Aatrox came in way too early. He's not the kind of blind champion that people like to make him out to be. So Gangplank comes in as an answer that not only does he beat the Aatrox, the Xayah Rakan right now up against the Aphelios is currently fine, and the Gangplank is shutting down a theme of the Aatrox, and it's also making Aatrox weaker into what the blue team is already drafting. So we can't even make it through R1, R2, and there's already a really big problem. So the R1, R2 is already really vulnerable and weak. It's very prone to getting abused, because either now the red team will draft things that are very good against Gangplank, Xayah, and Rakan, and the champions that are very good against these kind of champions are off-theme and off-kilter with the Aatrox. Or, the way that they're going to achieve this, so whether it be R3, R4, or R5, no matter what, you're gonna deteriorate your Aatrox pick. So what's happening here inside of the champ select is Broken Blade says Aatrox is a good blind. Well, no, Aatrox is not a good blind, because Aatrox commits you to a theme, and if you don't commit to that theme along with him and drag him along for the ride, you're harming the rest of the draft. So even though Broken Blade might say in a vacuum here, Aatrox is a good blind, well, first off, no, you're being dishonest, because I'm sure that if I asked you other champions that you could pick into Aatrox, even if there might be trade-offs, but you could end up scaling better, you would probably acknowledge or agree that there are other champions that you can pick. And that means that the red team ends up getting the fucking rug pulled out from underneath them, and that now they're committed to a team composition or a style because of how committed Aatrox is. Now, we mentioned that Rakan has multiple modes and that he's able to do different things. Aatrox isn't. Have you ever seen Aatrox try to peel for his team? Have you ever seen Aatrox try to do things defensively? Have you ever seen Aatrox not try to do what his mode is designed to do or what his champion ideally is looking for? It's not a good look. Not a good fucking look. Now, Rakan has a little bit more leeway. Aatrox doesn't. He's a bad champion. Now, it doesn't matter, again, what the top laners say in a vacuum, because you can also find the very same fucking top laners to agree that other top lane champions are playable into Aatrox. Now, here's the key word, playable, okay? Can you please play something that can either go even against Aatrox or beat him, that maybe isn't as fun, but helps the overall draft? Can we open up things a little bit more? Because Gangplank's not the only thing that's going to fucking smack his face. Poppy could come in and smack his face too. Soraka could come in, smack Aatrox's face as well. There is a plethora of options that can bitch slap Aatrox in the draft phase, and even if they don't feel as fun, the top laner would probably agree, yeah, those are picks. Now, of course, there's more going on inside of the draft here, because you know that the R3 response is going to come in, R4, R5. Aphelios isn't a sort of champion that has like dashes and whatnot, so it's a little bit too early for Poppy. We acknowledge that Poppy might be really good against certain themes that the red team could end up having. If we do something like this, if we do Gangplank and then they do something like, oh, we need a jungle here, let's get Jarvan, right? Because people always talk about I mean, fucking look at this. TSM actually unironically picked Jarvan, but Gangplank's already selected. So the thing is that if this was a jungle, if this was Gragas, okay, and the enemy team picks the Jarvan, this team probably doesn't even acknowledge that Poppy is a pick. Poppy is absolutely a pick. Poppy is something that can just come in. It can neutralize the Jarvan, neutralize the Aatrox, let the Xayah, let the Gragas do exactly what they want to do. Now, one of the problems is that Aphelios is still enabled against this blue side draft. Aphelios still has potency, even though we're going to start trying to sculpt and we're going to try to rebuild something on B4, B5 that answers the overarching theme of what the red team has right now. Now, if they further commit to champions that get ruined for, you know, whatever unholy reason down here, maybe they go Nautilus, right? So let's say that they do Nautilus. Okay, well, perfect. Well, Poppy is screwing several champions on that team, and then if we just Azir, what are you gonna pick now? I mean, all that they have to do is now hold a Phalanx. As long as they hold a Phalanx, they have so many more options available. Aatrox can't play the game. Ask a top laner how they feel playing Aatrox against these champions. They're not going to have a good time, because he can't engage. He falls off after 2 fucking items. Even when he gets to 2 items, Poppy is beating him. Aatrox 1.5 item, Poppy 1 item. Sounds like she has lower economy. She does. She's still more valuable. And then because of the nature of blue side and the proximity of carry champions to the Baron at the later stages, it means that the red team's heavily reliant on some sort of like early dragons and whatnot. But the way the draft currently is sculpted up doesn't seem like priority or things of that nature that people always like, they'll always talk about. They'll be like, ah, my priority. Doesn't mean anything. How many times have we watched, so I've watched so many games this split. I've cast almost every single LCK game. LCS, I've watched every game. LEC, I've watched probably 30-40% of the games, okay? How many times have we seen teams get first, second dragon, and then by the time third dragon ends up coming up, how convenient the scaling champions are online, and they're able to actually contest it. And obviously you know, you could argue that that's a tightrope in some cases, but obviously in this one it's not really going to be a problem. Now, what is red team going to do here? Well, champions that are really good against Azir, and really good against Poppy, really good against Gragas, really good against Xayah and Rakan, are going to be champions that are now all of a sudden off theme. with the other 4 champions. The champions that they want to pick all of a sudden look like dumpster fires. Veigar fucking ruins everyone on the side of blue. Veigar can't come in. Something's going wrong. R1 through R4. There's a really big problem, R1 through R4. So you get 2 pro players, or you get not 2, but you get multiple pro players to play both sides of the coin, and you run down the list as the top laner, the jungler, the AD carry, the support, etc., and you ask them, how do you feel playing into these champions? And all of a sudden, you get a very different tune of an answer, because when they initially proposed their champion inside of, the mic check, or, like, oh, we can pick this here, I can pick this here, all of a sudden, it comes with a lot of bias that only entertains their own champion, not how all of them are going to work together and be cohesive. Veigar can't come in because he's off theme with everyone else. Veigar's really good against all of these champions, but the problem is that Veigar is very prone to being dragged through the line. Veigar, all the pressure's on Veigar. Veigar can come in. Oh, well, he can come in, but it sucks. Veigar doesn't like this. This isn't what Veigar wants to be surrounded by. Veigar doesn't want these champions on his team. He hates himself right now. So even though Veigar is okay, now you could do something like Corki. Okay, cool. All the pressure's on Corki again. All the pressure in the world is just on Corki. Yet again. That's a problem. What do you mean, why does Veigar hate it? Because all the pressure in the world is on him to do stuff. His teammates don't really help him. He takes a long time to come online and really be effective. He ends up being itemized against once QSSs and like other things start coming in. If Azir has like cleanse because he's running Nimbus Cloak for whatever reason, not taking teleport, it's even more problematic. He needs to be 1v9. So it's a really big problem that you don't do to a player, but also you're losing in so many other areas. Poppy is smacking Aatrox. Okay, bottom lane, I mean, it has stuff going on for it, but Azir is able to cover for Gragas in a lot of ways. Jarvan needs to go low econ in order to make up for the draft discrepancy in every single role. And so because Jarvan has to now go low econ, and the blue team is aware that Jarvan needs to go low econ, Gragas only needs to power farm and match counter gank everything, because the onus isn't on him to create any sort of pressure. So the blue team can now suddenly show up with stronger stats in the later stages, and everything comes down to Veigar, and it's a really big problem. And interestingly enough, this is actually similar to what happened in this TSM draft. So we move Gangplank over to B3, and now again you're thinking about champions that, okay, well, what champions are good against Gangplank, Xayah, and Rakan? You're still looking at poke champions, but now if we start like poke disengagey, long range, like counter engage, counter dive, you need Xayah to hate her life. You need the Xayah player to say, I can't get in there. You need the Gangplank player to say, similar to Ornn, even if I engage, my teammates can't get in. You need the Gangplank player to say, I can't walk up. You need all of these things to be present, and to do that means that you've already identified a problem with the Aatrox. And we can't just say that it's okay to pick Aatrox and then make them pick something like this. Well, okay, I lied. You can do stuff like that, but not with Aatrox. You need other champions that are going to be flexible. That starts to come in with like flex champions and whatnot. So you need champs that are able to do that. Now TSM ends up going with Nautilus. Okay, so they're picking Nautilus because in a vacuum, Nautilus versus Rakan. They're picking Nautilus because Nautilus is durable, he's safe, whatever. I mean, I'm not inside of the mic check, I have no idea why they're picking Nautilus. Maybe they're picking Nautilus because their support player can't play it. Well, okay, whose idea was it to have the support player in the last 60 scrims play Nautilus 30 games instead of playing other champions? How convenient. Anytime a new champion comes out, apparently every pro player in the world can play it after 1 week. How convenient that when a meta-shifting champion like Soraka or Ornn comes out, everyone can just magically play it. How convenient that when Faker or some elite player, debuts a new pick, by the next week, everyone's able to play it. How convenient is it that, how convenient. How convenient. We can just magically add champions to the pool. But we have to wait on someone else to do it rather than using our own brains. And when teams are having these draft conversations and they're talking about what we want to do in draft, oftentimes what's happening is there's a round group discussion with the players and the coach or the analyst or whatever. And what they'll say is like, oh, this champion's good here. This champion's good here. This champ's good here. And they'll view the thing through rose-tinted glasses relative to their own draft versus the opponent's. right? But they don't ask themselves, if they were the opponents, would they think the same thing about the opponent's draft? And oftentimes, again, this is why you need to remove the recency bias from some things, they will either say, like, no, it's a losing draft. I think it's really bizarre that players might need to play out a draft to then conclude that it's losing, because then you're entertaining emotions, you're doing, like, other sort of stuff. It's really important that players understand each other's own roles, the matchups, and how things actually work. And I'm not talking about communicating it in the middle of the game, because that's already a problem. You shouldn't need to communicate it in the middle of a game. Communication is necessary when there is lapses in knowledge that are present inside of the game. Communication is necessary when players aren't on the same page due to either a lack of preparation or due to a skill gap that might be occurring between them based on maybe certain situations that are happening. So that's when stuff is clearly going a little bit wrong in terms of prep and like other stuff. So the Nautilus comes in. As it currently stands, TSM's already losing. The B1 through B3 has more modes available to it. The Gangplank's beating the Aatrox in isolation. Gangplank really good against the 3 champions in isolation. Xayah Rakan getting enabled by 2 of the champions on the enemy team. Xayah also fine up against the Aphelios. Aphelios is the only champion that is somewhat enabled versus the enemy team, but obviously hates Gangplank, and he hates the way that, or the direction that this draft can go on B4, B5. Rakan, even though, I mean, he has the mode where he can go in on the opponent, and he has the alternative mode that we mentioned before, and that's been granted to him due to the picks that came out on R1 and R3 by TSM. So this is already losing, because again, you can't, if you continue to commit to this team composition, you're gonna have a bad fucking time. You're gonna have a really, really bad time. You're already losing in a really clutch lane. And now, you're gonna either have to show mid laner or jungler face up. And so this is another problem that we're gonna be having. So we go into the ban phase here. They ban away Leblanc from the enemy. Why the fuck would the enemy ever want to pick Leblanc? We've already assessed that Aatrox, Aphelios, and Nautilus will now be coming into the opponent. The opponent's the one with the disengage, the self-peel, the self-ultimate, as well as the engage and the offense ultimate that can come out of Gangplank, and the ability to pivot better than you ever can. Why would they ever pick LeBlanc and fuck themselves? In what universe would this team ever want to pick LeBlanc? Why would LeBlanc want to come in with fucking Gangplank, Xayah, Rakan against this abomination that you've ended up drafting so far? I'm never in a million years thinking LeBlanc. What the hell is this? Why LeBlanc? We're outscaling you, we're beating you in isolation, and on top of that, the remaining champion picks that would be good for you or ideal for you, we can respond to. Or it causes you to hurt your own draft. LeBlanc doesn't make any sense. No reason to ban it. You should beg them to pick LeBlanc so that you have a chance back into this game. Because if they pick LeBlanc on B4 or B5, and they pick, you know, a jungler that maybe isn't the best at CC, all of a sudden, maybe you can get saved by Kassadin, who's going to be able to do the skirmishy brawler kind of stuff against the B1 through B5 of the opponent, as well as be a late game insurance policy that is really good at also synergizing with the Aatrox, with the Nautilus, with the Aphelios, etc. Maybe you can do something like that. But by banning away LeBlanc, you're actually dissuading the opponent or you're not dissuading them, you're preventing them from picking something that's self-harming. The LeBlanc pick by FlyQuest in this draft would be inting. It would detract from what they should be considering when you think about, in isolation, all these champions. Okay, so the LeBlanc ban comes in. Opponent responds with Zoe. Zoe is kind of interesting, because Zoe is a pivot away, again, from the Aatrox, the Nautilus, and the Aphelios, but the Zoe is still manageable. The Zoe, however, would come in on R5, which means that you're already winning inside of the draft. So the Zoe ban is also really peculiar. Yeah, okay, if you know what I mean by that. Azir ends up coming in, and Azir is a good ban because Azir handles a lot of what you guys are trying to do, and Azir is the kind to pivot away. But the problem is Azir can come in on R5, but Azir can still be matched in range by champions that come in on B4, B5. So again, this is, I mean, so that's if TSM picks it. If blue side would pick it, Azir is really good against the Aatrox and against the Nautilus and whatnot, and it is on theme with the opponent, so it's a weird ban all around. Zilean now comes in. Now the Zilean thing is also really strange because you can make Zilean feel like he doesn't have any utility. Now I understand it's Bjergsen or whatever, and maybe teams feel like they need to ban away Zilean. But, or, like, maybe they're thinking, like, oh, I just don't want to go up against Zilean. Zilean's another champion that you can actually end up beating. And Zilean does play into the theme of the Aatrox, the Nautilus, and whatnot, similarly to Kassadin. But Zilean suffers in a way that Kassadin doesn't. Even though Zilean has a lot of mobility, he's able to be controlled more by the terrain than, say, a Kassadin would with his blink. So the Zilean ban... it doesn't really matter. This is like one of those things, like when I'm on the LCK test or when I'm thinking about certain things, the Zilean, it's both on theme and off theme. I'm trying to think of a way to be more articulate. The Zilean would have to come in on R5, and you might be able to just respond to their R4 so much that it ends up making Zilean a non-factor, especially if you have terrain controlling champions, because then it just hurts Zilean all the more. So that's pretty much all that's happening there. Jarvan comes in now on R4. Okay, so Jarvan, same theme. Same theme Nautilus, same theme Aatrox, etc. Aphelios, everyone's short range now. So all of a sudden, this team could actually pick Cassiopeia, and if they pick a jungler that can reach a long-range backline champion that would beat Cassiopeia, there's a really big problem, because now it means that they've prevented your pivot into a champion that would then harm Cassio and also be somewhat good against Gangplank. And generally, the champions that harm Cassiopeia are actually influenced by Gangplank in a negative manner. And so the champions that I'm referring to are like the long-range poke champions or champions that can also control terrain and make things very hard for her. But obviously, if something like this ends up coming in on B4, B5, can't pick Xerath anymore. You already banned out the Azir. Like, what mage are you gonna pick? You're gonna pick Cassiopeia? Well, I guess, yeah, sure. You can or not Cassio. You're gonna pick Orianna to go up against Cassiopeia? Yeah, sure. You can pick Orianna against Cassiopeia, and then you can also run off a cliff after 2 items when all of your fucking teammates are basically walking corpses like the Walking Dead. And then you can feel really bad there. You can't choose any sort of mid laners that have a reliance on like super special wombo combo because things are just going to be too problematic. Now Cassiopeia is also preventing a lot of other mids that would be on par with the Aatrox, the Nautilus, and the Jarvan, and things all around just get really ugly. No matter what, it just gets really awkward. So they pick the Jarvan, and now the Trundle comes out on B4 by Fly, and then B5 ends up being Orianna, another terrain-controlling champion, really good against the Aphelios, good against Aatrox, good against Nautilus, good against Jarvan. Ask yourself how Orianna feels against all of these champions. You're going to be met with I feel great. Gangplank. So what do you notice about all these champions right now? Rakan has both of his modes enabled. Rakan doesn't have an obligation to get ahead of the opponents because Aatrox on a timer, Nautilus on a timer, Jarvan on a timer. Outscaled in a vacuum, outscaled in a vacuum, outscaled all of them in a vacuum in isolation. Can't engage onto Xayah, can't engage onto Xayah, can't engage onto Dia. Terrain morphing, terrain morphing, terrain morphing. And what champion are you going to pick now? You're gonna try to pivot into a long-range mage to try to make up for the fact that you're fucking The Walking Dead on R1 through R4 or what? I don't even know. You're gonna, oh, okay, yeah, let's slap in the Victor. Great, Victor hates his life. If Victor was a machine, he would unplug himself. Congratulations, what a great draft. Thank you so much. Hashtag TSM. Fan-fucking-tastic, wow. Jesus Christ. How terrible. You can slap Karma in and it doesn't do anything. You slap Karma in, Karma hates herself, okay? Karma can't fight, because Orianna, okay, let's do this now, you ready? Here we go, ready? Let's do a fucking mid-tier 1 turret, because you'll never end up getting it, right? What's gonna happen in the mid-game stalemates? What's gonna happen in mid-game stalemates? You think any of these champions can just magically engage onto blue team? You think the obligation is on the blue team to come out of their base and not just turtle up for free to 3-4 items, etc.? Do you think that this team can somehow magically secure the dragons just for free? Oh, the cam is blocking apparently. Let me turn off video capture. So you think that these champions can just magically control things for free? No, they fucking can't. Are you being dishonest or what? They can't ever enter any of the jungle because their champions will get torn to shreds if they ever clump up. The Orianna can control all the terrain. This team also can't just magically do Baron. It's too impossible. So this triangle, I always talk about this triangle, so easy to defend for all these champions. And one of the cool things that you'll notice is that the vision is able to be controlled a lot easier than anything that the red team can muster up, because all of this vision's irrelevant. Everything here is completely irrelevant. This is non-relevant area. This doesn't pertain to a Baron dance. The only stuff that pertains to a Baron Dance is inside of this triangle, which means that this team gets to scale up for free. This team gets to go the distance, 3-4 items, etc. This team gets to, you know, basically hold the red team on a leash with the Orianna Ball, gets to hold them on a leash with the Trundle Pillar. The Trundle Pillar ruins so many champions. They have so many responses to Nautilus's attempted engages. Aatrox can't scale up against the enemy team either, because he has nothing to enable him. He can't engage onto the enemy team. The enemy team has too much to be able to disengage. Now, with the blue teams ahead, well, fucking shit, they still have even a way to push. They can still siege. They can still control all the area because Orianna has she's multi-talented. Gangplank, multi-talented. Rakan versus this red team composition, multi-talented. So this is it's very, you know, it's very confusing, you know? So Karma doesn't do anything. If you end up adding in Victor, yeah, Victor's the only one that does something. But the problem is that he's surrounded with teammates that suck, and Victor's not a one-man army. So if there's ever any sort of like a Baron Dance happening on the red-hand side of the map, you're lying if you think that, okay, let's say that this team tries to control this area. Well, they can't control this area too and this area. It's not how their team composition works. The Gangplank ultimate too valuable inside of narrow corridors. Gangplank ultimate for free. Aatrox can never move Gangplank because Aatrox is never ahead of Gangplank. Now you start talking about, well, Aatrox can get ahead of Gangplank. So this draft all around is just, it's really rough. And I mean, we identify a problem on R1, R2. We learn very quickly that Aatrox on R1 has too many responses on B2, B3 that also asphyxiates follow-up picks on R3, R4, R5. And again, it's because of what champions are going to come in and what the draft is going to end up evolving into, right? And that's why Aatrox early is really, it's vulnerable. It's very vulnerable, right? Now, other punishes, I mean, we already talked about alternative punishes, right? You could do something like they could pick Nautilus right here, right? You can go Gragas. Oh, shit. You can go Gragas, right? This is pretty standard. You don't even have Gangplank yet, right? Then they end up picking Jarvan, right? And I'm just showing you guys alternative punishes, right? Poppy can come in. Like, come on. Destruction. Destruction everywhere. Can't engage, can't engage, can't engage. Disengage and engage. Poke, siege. Multiple modes on Rakan. Aatrox, only one option. Nautilus, one option. Jarvan, one option. Getting outscaled. All of them are getting outscaled. And then we still don't even have a terrain changer, right? So if, like, Azir's not even banned, like, this is really rough. Like, let's say that Azir's not banned. Okay, what are you gonna pick? You're gonna pivot away? What are you gonna pick? You have to pick the champions that are good against Azir. You're gonna pick LeBlanc and put yourself on a 2-item timer? LeBlanc's not gonna do anything. She's not going to do anything. It doesn't even matter. Okay, she's an Azir counter. What, you're going to... Well, I guess you could pick Kassadin here, but again, like, Kassadin is a little bit better than some of the other options because he synergizes with these champs, and he opens up possibility in the later stages of the game. But the Victor is really weird. Not the Victor's really weird. The Kassadin is still kind of weird at this stage. What, are you going to pick another... you're going to pick Xerath against Azir at this point? I mean, Xerath is really good. He's good against Poppy. He's good against Xayah. He's good against Rakan. He's good against Azir. The problem is that he's really weak to Gragas. So Gragas is sort of coming in sort of like a sideboard card in a TCG and basically dissuading the Xerath pivot. And this pivot is a pivot away, the same way that TSM's pivot into Victor is a pivot away from what their team composition's theme is. And now, versus a different type of team composition, this might actually be completely fine. These champions might be entirely plausible. These champions might, like, I don't know, let's do something like... Now these champions have to come in. Now these champions have to engage onto the red team. Now these champions enable Aatrox's mode. Even in a defensive manner, Aatrox has a lot of value against all of these champions. The itemization is also problematic for the blue team. The red team has a lot of benefit in their itemization. Jarvan all of a sudden is very enabled as a good champion. Victor, very hard to stick to by all these champs. Aphelios enabled, being able to kite backwards. These champions also have poke and siege now available to them as well, because this team composition can't respond to it well. All of a sudden, these nooks and, you know, these little nooks and crannies and whatnot, they actually favor this team composition more than the blue team composition. It's the same 5 champions, but with a million different variables. And the lane dynamics and the matchups are all vastly different. This is how drafting works. Drafting is not just fucking slapping together whatever champions that you perceive to be good at that point in the draft. It's how the champions come together cohesively and how they work in isolation relative to the opponents, as well as, well, I guess cohesive covers that. Okay, so this is an example of you know, a team composition that same 5 champs, but now it's really good. Now it's not shit. But the second that you change up some of these pieces and you make the Gangplank and you add the Orianna just like FlyQuest did and you have the Trundle, all of a sudden the Aatrox can't move. The Nautilus is suffocated. Aphelios is short range, getting held on a leash by Orianna. He can't play the game. Victor doesn't know what the fuck to do because even when he gets to 2 items, he feels like shit against the opponents because his damage actually isn't meaningful enough and the opponents have non-active healing and other stuff that's going to end up stifling his poke. You have other problems inside of the jungle where now your jungler needs to play low econ to make up for the fact that there's lane discrepancies present. And then because he's low econ, he gets further hurt by the fact that he's already naturally outscaled by the Trundle. There's so many things going on here inside of the draft. Okay, so now if we're looking for you know, a team composition that, you know, we can have these 5 champions in isolation, but maybe we ruin them a little bit more, right? Maybe something ends up happening that is going to be a little bit different, right? So I don't know, maybe we have Draven, and then we have you could have a mage support, right? You could have like Xerath down in bot lane even, would be completely fine. You could have Bard. Bard would even be completely fine versus the enemy team. You could have more long range things, like you can slap together 5 champions that are then also very good against the opponents. This team composition is also even susceptible to Kassadin and whatnot. So there's a million different options that you could end up going that would hurt this team composition. This one has modes available, it has terrain scaling and whatnot, so things do get a little bit more tricky, but in the end, there's still like glorified weaknesses that are, you know, that are present, right? So yeah, I mean, okay, let's just add in Morgana. Zyra's obviously not the best here because whatever, right? You could have Draven Morgana down in bot lane. You could have Bard down in bot lane that would sort of enable things. There's so much value to gain in so many different ways, right? You can have Graves on this team, right? Graves, really valuable against all of these champions mode. He has the range access. He's still a physical damage champion, which leaves you a lot of options that are present up in top lane. And the thing about Gangplank that is like you could have Vlad versus Gangplank. All of a sudden you outscale them there too, and then Vladimir continues to be ranged. And then all that you need is something in mid lane that ends up answering to the Orianna that's pretty effective. And again, you end up having something that in a vacuum is still a really good draft against the opponents, even though the 5 champions end up remaining the same, right? So you can slap in tons of other different champions at this point in the draft. Now, these champions probably look fucking weird. These champions look super giga weird, right? And it doesn't matter that they don't have CC. Well, the final champion hasn't even come in yet. But this is what, like, what I'm trying to talk about. All right, we're gonna go into game 2 draft. It's not even, I mean, it's not even that weird when you think about it. Like, can support players play Bard? Yeah. Can top laners play Vladimir? Yeah, top laners can play Vladimir. Like, this isn't that unruly. This isn't that unreasonable you know, as a spot. Now, the thing about Vladimir is that he would prefer that they're not. Now, if Ornn wasn't banned or something, you could have Ornn come in here. Like, that would be another option that you could end up having be present. Game 2 draft? I mean, Game 2 draft gets even worse. Game 2 draft's the same exact thing, you know, and that's why it gets worse. Now, they ended up winning. What ended up happening? No, Anivia is not as ideal, because, again, terrain morphing and then Gangplank grants access to her. So, things are happening here. But I'm just trying to show you guys that just because it's 5 champions, this doesn't make it a comp. Whenever I hear that something's a comp, okay, it means that it can be beat. Now, if you go on MTG Goldfish, right, or something like that, I'll just use an example again. Where's meta? Metagame. Okay, let's click on metagame. Now, one of the things that you'll notice is that all of these decks have a thing called a sideboard. Sideboard means that these are cards that come in very, very specific matchups. You see this card? Counter non-creature spell. So it only works against other control decks. So because this only works against other control decks, you don't keep it in your main board. Now, again, cycling back to the very first thing that I said, League of Legends is a face-up information game with no concealment. Nothing is concealed. So whenever I hear someone has a team composition, I immediately think you're a fucking idiot. I immediately think that if you just think that a team composition, throwing everything else out the window, is something, you're stupid. I don't even know what to say about that, because what you're basically saying is that you're going to pick 5 champions devoid of what the opponents are picking. And whenever you hear that, and again, drafting in League, well, you can include the sideboard mid-draft. That's the way that stuff works. So, like, just because you have a team composition doesn't mean that there's not answers. Doesn't mean that there's not things that can end up happening. Like, I mean, even Azir could have been fine. So, okay. FlyQuest, this is game number 3. Senna gets picked up, so we're not going to talk about the Senna thing. Ornn banned away first yet again, even though there's answers to Ornn. Another really bizarre thing is that you can see that they have maybe intention to pick the Zilean in the draft. And in fact, they're even willing to pick him early. Zilean's one of the champions that is actually really good against Ornn. So it's really, really bizarre. And when you consider, wasn't it TSM or was it Cloud9 that did like Zilean Kindred? Those are 2 champions that fucking smack Ornn. Okay, it was Cloud9. So Zilean Kindred, Ornn can't play the game. Ornn really, really can't play the game. His engage is always nullified. He can't go melee range because there's just way too many problems. And he ends up being a liability because you can match him in terms of scaling, and then your jungler invalidates him, even if he ends up being behind. So Zilean and Kindred as a combo, as a 1-2 punch, can really answer well to Ornn team compositions. And obviously Zilean can even be played top lane, he can be played support, so there's like multi-flex potency there. You can even take Zilean into Ornn, which is also really cool. So I don't know. The Zilean pick in this draft seemed bad. Okay, so let's get through it. So Tahm kench banned away again by FlyQuest, and then TSM yet again with the Syndra. And I'm not gonna go over the same things that I've said elsewhere. The Syndra ban is the Syndra ban's bad in regards to how the champion pertains to red team versus blue team. You can draft against it, or if they pick it on blue early, and it's responded to very well or it's. You're able to draft it on red really well, especially because it's one of the answers to Aphelios. I know not every single ADC can play Syndra. That's their problem. They should practice and get better at playing Syndra. But she's obviously she has flex potency too. Kalista ends up being banned away yet again, and now TSM here on 3 they ban the set, right? Yeah, they ban the set. So R1 Rakan comes in. Now notice something also that's really weird. The Aphelios and the Nautilus. Now, here's... You ready for something that's really weird? Okay, let's take a look at game 2. Oh, sorry. Aphelios Aatrox. Game 1, Aphelios Aatrox. Something in the draft is now making them think that Nautilus needs to get picked up even though he doesn't offer anything, and that he's already a detriment. What happened? Apparently, Broken Blade has now decided, between the time span of 1 and 2 games, that no longer does he want to pick Aatrox on R1, R2. Something has already... something's happened, right? Now, obviously, we're not privy to it. So, he could still be picked R3. That is something. But again, why are we R1 Aphelios, R2 Nautilus? You already know what their bot lane's going to be. You should get a counter pick to it that isn't Nautilus, because Nautilus commits you to a style. Nautilus is very answerable. And just like we saw in Game 1 and Game 2, there's answers to the theme of Nautilus. He's not as blindable, or, I mean... He's blindable, but he's very answerable, which is part of the problem. So this is already really peculiar to me that they've now shifted their focus, and when they shift their focus, but the response is mostly the same, it means to me that their assessment of the situation isn't really clear, or that they don't themselves even really understand maybe what the hell they're doing. So now the Xayah, wait one sec. The Xayah and the Aatrox comes in. Okay, so now we get a little bit of a mix-up. So the difference between Game 1's draft, Game 1 and 2's draft, and now Game 3 is you notice that Aatrox, he's gonna pull them along for the ride. Aatrox is red. He's black-red as a champion, and I'm not referring to his color scheme. As you guys have probably heard me say before, Xayah is red-white. Rakan is red-white mostly, and then a little bit of blue. So all of these champions have a theme now. Short range, emphasis on engage or counter engage. Short range, emphasis on engage, can disengage, must engage. Unless Aatrox ends up coming in as like a counter to like that, like you guys saw me show like the Maokai, the heavy engagey, melee range, short range, etc. team composition, which is not currently present, which means that Aatrox is coming in too early, and you can't account for what the enemy is, well, you can account for what they're going to draft, but you shouldn't hand over the reins this early on inside of the draft. I think that's really fucking bad. because obviously there's nothing preventing TSM from just slamming Gangplank R3, and all of a sudden they provided a lot of aid to bot lane, beats Aatrox in isolation, beats these 3 champions in isolation, really good against pivots on B4, B5 in terms of like long range champions, or champions that are very prone to their backline being reached. So Gangplank could just be slammed on R3. And it would obviously that would be winning for TSM, but they don't slam Gangplank on B3. Instead, they slam Zilean. Now the Zilean, the Zilean's a little bit weird. The Zilean can obviously be responded to with champion picks. And the thing that's so interesting is that Zilean, you would actually think, has more problematic laning phases against a wide array of mid laners than some other champions that you could have picked in terms of safety. So now we've established that they're willing to concede or forego these hiccups. Now, if you guys remember what I said at the very beginning, when I asked, can you ask your top laner if something is playable in terms of making it more beneficial for the entirety of the draft as well as the team? And the answer ends up becoming very clear. Yeah, I can play Poppy into Aatrox. Yeah, I can play Ornn. Well, Ornn beats Aatrox, but you'll find people that say otherwise, and no matter what, we'll just assess it as like close, okay? For sake of the conversation right now. Yeah, I could play Ornn into Aatrox. Yeah, I can play Poppy versus Aatrox. Yeah, I could play like this tank into Aatrox or something. I could play all of these champions into Aatrox, even though it's not as fun and maybe doesn't give them as much control in the early stages. Okay, so very similarly, the Zilean's coming in with basically the same mindset. Doesn't really seem to care what it's up against right now. Doesn't seem to have any regard for it whatsoever, but it's trying to do it for the greater good of the team composition. Now, seeing stuff like this is really bizarre, because then it's also lacking and it's absent in other drafts, which ends up being really fucking strange. So Zilean comes in, and I think this is way too early to have Zilean come in. For a multitude of reasons, because now you have to commit to other things that are going to give Zilean more like disengagey kind of poke control, and you have to focus on that. You have to focus on making sure Zilean's protected. You have to focus on ensuring that the Rakan Aatrox still has to keep coming into you and that you have options available to you. Then we move into the ban phase, and yet again they ban the LeBlanc. So we talked about this in the last draft. FlyQuest bans... Okay, FlyQuest actually bans the Kindred. And so that that's there. And then they ban Kassadin. I spelled it wrong. They ban Kassadin, and then Olaf gets banned away. Now, the Olaf thing is really strange, because the Olaf would end up actually enabling the Aatrox. It would give Xayah and Rakan a little bit more value. And even though Olaf could be a little bit problematic, he would end up having to come in really early and show himself on R4. And then Olaf would actually detract from what Zilean ideally would like in terms of just control over the game. I understand what people would maybe say, and that Olaf obviously really fast, good dragon control, my priority, maybe able to even to shore up some Zilean weaknesses depending on like what the lane matchup is. But for the most part, Olaf is not the kind of champion that you ideally should be thinking about when thinking of, hey, I want some sort of a champion. Or in terms of like, hey, I want to ensure that the enemy has to come into us, that they have to fight into us, that they're going to actually be asphyxiated. And so now what ends up happening is they R4 the Jarvan. And so Jarvan comes in on R4. The thing about Jarvan is that, yes, he can fulfill the role that Zilean wants. Yes, he can peel and be defensive and whatnot for the Aphelios and the Nautilus, which is okay for right now. It's okay for the moment. Is it okay for what is possibly coming B4, B5 in terms of pivots or in terms of what can end up coming next? No, it's not. So the Jarvan isn't as safe as one would like to think that the Jarvan is, because again, the B4, B5 of the opponents, because of the discrepancy that is present now inside of the team composition, because it's committed, means that they're susceptible to stuff. Azir comes in on B4, and it's followed up by Trundle. So right now, it's again Zilean versus the world. Because these champions are all losing to the 5 on the enemy team. The only thing saving them right now is Zilean. Zilean is the only thing that is protecting them right now against the enemy team. One of the other things that they could end up doing would be, I think, a very, very thin line that they could walk, is they could... So, they could go something like Xerath, and some people would say, Xerath against Trundle or something, you're trolling. Shut the fuck up. Jesus Christ, can you position for the love of God? In the later stages of the game, you can send the Zilean top lane against Aatrox. This requires your top laner to be able to play Zilean. We've seen Zilean versus Aatrox, I believe, in the LCK. We've also seen it in like Challengers Korea. We played it, I think, on stream even against Afrika in November, December when we were doing those doing those like stream scrims and whatnot. So Zilean can go into Aatrox. Can your top laner play it? Probably not. No, not Fizz. What? No. You don't want to go into the opponents. You want to make them hate their lives. So another champion that you could end up going here is Veigar you could go Veigar on R5, and again send the Zilean top lane. The problem with having Veigar and Zilean now in the same team composition is the enemy can itemize against you very well. Jarvan's going to be tank, so he's not serving as much purpose. And even though Veigar is good against the enemy team composition, he's sort of throwing your team composition off kilter. So Veigar ends up being a pretty bad champion. It ends up being pretty weak and vulnerable. Again, the thing is that this team composition, again, much like the Orianna and whatnot, it's controlling terrain. It's not doing it as well as it was with the Gangplank and whatnot, but it's still sort of controlling terrain. It's still making it very difficult for everything that's not the Zilean, and we end up identifying pretty quickly that the Zilean is sort of taking on the mantle that Victor had. And TSM's fucking response, even after Game 1, Game 2, what do you notice about Game 1, Game 2? Aatrox, melee bruiser that has to engage into the enemy, right? Which is it's a problem. So what is TSM's bright idea? Let's slam Aurelia on R5 for the counter matchup against the Aatrox in isolation. What? Does anyone not notice the similarity? Aatrox is enabled by Aurelia's archetype as a champion, similarly to how Gangplank was enabled versus Aatrox. It's the same fucking comp, different colors, or different faces. It's the same comp. It is wholly the same comp, archetype-wise. Very similar. Online spikes. Very similar. Way of conducting itself. It's the same fucking comp. It is fecal matter, and this one has some corn in it. You know when you get up from the bathroom and you turn around and you're like, I don't remember eating corn. That's what this is. It is the same goddamn thing. So there's obviously issues. Now you could do something like Corki, but again this requires pivoting Zilean top lane. So now we're looking. Okay, so now we're establishing that there is a bit of a problem here against this enemy team composition. What is a champion that can actually come in that gives us some sort of modes and also ends up winning against the enemy team composition? Is there a way that we can outpoke the Azir using our Zilean and have a defensive tool against the remaining 4 champions? Well, yeah, I guess there is, right? You could slam Alawi. Alawi R5 would make it come down to a war between Zilean versus Azir. So Zilean versus Azir would now end up becoming the war. Red team would have a lot more power on defense than the... red team would have a lot more power on defense than the blue team. Red team would also be able to siege with Alawi Tentacle and Zilean bombs. However, red team still suffers in a lot of ways, but Alawi is able to operate on her own in top lane, which lets Jarvan function as a low economy, if necessary, around mid and bot. Right? So there is now Alawi's also on theme with what blue team or red team is trying to do against blue team. The problem is that this is still a really shaky draft because we can conclude that a lot of these things are happening in isolation, but that this team is still sort of, I mean, it's still sort of okay for the most part. They can't take a straight up team fight anymore, not the same way that they could have before. Some people are saying something like Poppy. You could go something like Poppy, but it does the same thing. But now when you have Poppy, Jarvan, like if we change Alawi to Poppy, it does change some of the dynamics of the team composition, especially because you have a little bit of value with like Trundle Pillar, and you have some value with Jarvan Cataclysm and whatnot. The Poppy has to run into the opponents, and sure, she can get really tanky, but it has diminishing returns against the Trundle, whereas Alawi stacks HP and whatnot. Alawi stacks a lot of HP items. Alawi scales, I would say, a bit better than Poppy against the enemy team comp. and Alawi just has a better curve, I think, throughout the parts of the game. Poppy is left more, she's less left less on an island than an Alawi would be. And there's still value with the Poppy, but the same thing with the Poppy that you end up having is that it's still Zilean versus Azir. So one of the issues here is, can we get our Zilean to go top lane, and can we figure out a way to somehow have value against this team composition? Now, you could say something like Vladimir, and there are some people that would be willing to pick Vladimir into this team, but even Vladimir gets a little bit weird, because now you have Zilean on your team, so it's not the most ideal thing in the world either. So Vladimir even ends up sucking. And then you start thinking about, like, other champions that could exist. Well, I mean, Gangplank could come in on R5. Gangplank would be fucking good. Gangplank ruins Azir, right? Because Azir doesn't like champions that reach him, that don't have to interact with him. Azir doesn't mind champions that reach him, and then he Shurima shuffles, or he just stands his ground and blows them up, or he repositions, right? So Gangplank is really good on R5. Gangplank is on theme with everything else. Gangplank beats Aatrox in a vacuum. Gangplank, very sturdy and stable against all of this team comp. Gangplank gives aid to the Nautilus and to the Aphelios. Gangplank allows the Jarvan to actually have a little bit more power inside of his play style and whatnot. So Gangplank's really strong here. In this thing. Now, Corki could come in as well on R5 against the Azir. Corki has a lot of value against the enemy team composition as well. If you really want some sort of like an assassin that gives you more range and stuff that isn't an Aurelia, you would have Akali, because Akali could do a lot better against Akali could do a lot better in the later stages than an Aurelia would ever be able to, because they're not gonna itemize as well against Akali Zilean in later stages than they would against like Aurelia and whatnot, just in terms of the value. Akali also, I would argue, has a much better wake up than Aurelia does in the early to mid transition, and so stuff like that ends up being okay. Other champions that, like, some people might think of is like, well, could you have Karma come in? Well, Karma, yeah, then it's sort of like Zilean and Karma versus Azir. And obviously you can have Karma up in top lane as like a neutralizer, and that's perfectly fine too. I would be less okay with Soraka in this team composition, even with the Zilean and whatnot, because then it puts all the pressure onto Aphelios as well as the Zilean, but they would itemize for the Azilian, and then if your Aphelios doesn't get really far ahead, you end up being completely cucked. Jace is really bad. Jace doesn't do anything. So Jace is really bad in this specific spot. I mean, Ornn is also banned away, so Ornn isn't really an option either. And then again, you have to keep thinking about how these champions interact against the opponent. So we've looked at like Alawi, we've looked at Alawi, we looked at like pivoting Zilean up into top lane, we've looked at Poppy, we've looked at Ryze. You can't go Ryze. Ryze doesn't do anything. Ryze is short range. Ryze can't interact with the Ryze, or Ryze can't interact with the Azir. Ryze gets hurt more than any of these other champions by like the Trundle and the fact that he's short range. Ryze ends up enabling the Xayah. Ryze doesn't have a lot of value. You can't go Rumble either. It's too much magic resistance, and again, it puts a lot of pressure onto the Zilean, and then this team composition is rewarded with disengaging and continuing to scale up. You can't do Fiora either, because same problems. Fiora gets locked up. She gets manhandled. You know, and again, play both sides of the coin. So what I mean is, like, if you're these 5 champions, are you fine with Fiora? If you're Fiora, are you fine against these 5 champions? And the answer is no. No, you can't do Vel'Koz. You can't do Orianna. Well, Orianna actually, okay, Orianna is like something that you could ask about. Mordekaiser is really bad, because you have diminishing returns with your Zilean, because by getting QSS, you're also hurting his damage, you're hurting Nautilus, and you're hurting yourself in the later stages of the game. Mordekaiser suffers from the same exact problems as other champions, and that he's too melee range. Now you guys are just listing off champions, so I'm just going to move on from this point, because you're not getting the entire point. Like, so many champions that are being listed in chat make no fucking sense. And then it makes me think if you've even been listening. So this is a problem. Now, no matter what, we're realizing that our R5 is really hurt by our R2 and also our R3. Even though TSM obviously showed the willingness to do the thing that we talked about in draft number 1 by picking a passable champion into like Aatrox or something. So that's one of the things that are going on here. Urgot could come in on R5. Urgot is viable on R5. Urgot is absolutely viable on R5. That would be a champion, yes. But what I'm trying to get across to you is the fundamental thought process rather than just the champions themselves. And then, can we spot where things went wrong? The Jarvan is also problematic, but the Jarvan isn't a problem until these champions end up basically saying that he's a problem, because it commits to too much of a theme that lets the opponents respond to it with just having a better edge of things. And again, a lot of this is how likely these matches are going to go. It's important that you spend time as like professional players or teammates talking about each other's matchups, but also learning them. When you do that, you probably have a much better idea of when you're suggesting certain champions inside of the draft and at what point you're trying to suggest them. There is merit to picking unorthodox champions, even if they're not in the best spot, if it means that you believe that the edge that you would get is greater than if you picked a champion. And when I say unorthodox, I mean like picking something completely bonkers, like Gnosis or, something super weird. Mundo is not good at all here. What are you talking about? Yeah, let's build Grievous Wounds so that we can hurt our Zilean as well, and then Mundo can do no damage and can't run into the enemy team and just get lit up. What? Hello? No, Kennen's bad too. Kennen means everyone has to engage or Kennen's shit. Why would Kennen be good? How is Kennen good on red team? How are you ever going to get into this triangle? You're never going to get into this triangle as Kennen. Oh, shit. You're never going to get into this this triangle as Kennen. Ezreal R5? No. Ezreal R5 isn't, well, if you can send Zilean top, Ezreal R5 is actually passable. Because then it shifts the modes of Nautilus and Jarvan, and it allows Aphelios to get further enabled, because you have insane value with Zilean and Ezreal against all these champions. But I think Ezreal is just worse than Corki. It's the same exact mindset. It's literally an identical mindset, but I think that Corki is a little bit better. I think Corki slightly edges him out. So there's stuff going on. Kayle, no. Kayle, no. No, not Kayle. Not Kayle. Cassio's not good. They have range. They have ways to displace her. You have magic damage on your team. Cassio can't reliably do anything. Cassio's weak. Quinn R5 is really bad. You have to run into them. Why do you want to run into them? That's what they want. Why do you want to run into them? You need to control the terrain, and you need to somehow out-mobilize them. That's what their team composition and theme is weak to. It's what it's really prone to. So you don't want to choose champs that go in. It's really bad. The responsibility is on you to get ahead. And the enemy team knows that. The enemy team's like, yeah, they have to get ahead of us. They have to run into us. Of course, we as 5 professional players should be able to recognize that and not just donk off. Okay, alright, we're going to move on to the next draft. So TSM, they open with an Ornn ban. So they banned it now on red and on blue. Yeah, I already said Alawi. Alawi was good. Alawi was fine. Lulu top lane, in that situation, it still makes it Zilean versus Azir. So things are still really weird. Tristana R5, so you want to put Tristana top against either Aatrox, or you want to pivot Zilean top and then make Tristana go R5. And that's still not good, because again, it still comes down to Zilean versus Azir. So TSM, they open with Ornn ban, enemy bans Senna, and then TSM bans Syndra. And so now they're banning it on red and blue, so I think this is obviously really problematic, that they're banning it on both teams. Set gets banned by Fly. I already gave my comments on Set, so I'm not going to say anything more on that. Kassadin ban coming in really early, I think is really bad, because you can easily draft a team composition that doesn't allow Kassadin to come in on either R4 or R5. Typically, he's always going to come in on R5, which gives you more than enough time to prevent him from being like a nuts pick. Kassadin is really fucking good. I agree with you. He is good, but the stars have to align. The stars are aligning a lot right now, though, for him. More than ever before, and I think that's because of... I think it's because of the mid, top, and jungle meta being the way that they are. But also, we're getting some diversity in support picks now that make some spots for Kassadin even better. So I think that's I mean, it's just like anything, right? Anything that exists long enough, like if you lock a meta in a TCG, eventually the top decks will keep changing. Okay. Let me... So now we ban Zoe. They open Rakan. We already talked that Rakan is really weak if opponents can draft against it. And now Kalista has obviously been let through. This was the game 4 draft. So now they do take Aatrox really early, and then they take Kalista. So already things get a little bit interesting. If you can send Aatrox mid and you can send Kalista top, certain champion picks aren't able to come out, or they would end up being really bad for the opponents. But we're back to having a very early Aatrox, so this is really really bad. However, on the flip side, the Xayah and the Renekton ends up coming in, thus enabling Aatrox. So these picks come in, they enable Aatrox, they enable Kalista, and also at this point, like Kalista Taric is a pretty standard pick. Taric could come in on R3, and it would be fine as well. The thing is that short range, emphasis on engage, one mode basically, unless you have, again, ability to flex this, which I don't believe that they do have, and these champions are basically bigger red. When it comes time for two champion, or well, Aatrox and Renekton sort of cancel each other out, but the Xayah and the Rakan, in terms of where they stand against these two champions, things are okay for them right now, but the Kalista in later, like with better teammates, she's going to be enabled by all the short range on this side, and I just misspoke. TSM, or FlyQuest is bigger red. Because these guys are sort of even until later stages of the game, then Aatrox gets more enabled, especially if there's more melee champions and more tanky champions on the side of TSM and more short range. Kalista will scale really well if there continues to be short range, heavy emphasis on engaged champions on enemy team. So now Pantheon comes in as a champion that can be multi-flex. So all of these champions, in theory, can go different roles. Pantheon can go support, Pantheon can go top, he can go jungle, he can go mid, Aatrox can go mid, Aatrox can go top, Kalista can go top, mid, and AD. So there's a lot of flexibility in that regard. As it stands right now, FlyQuest have more control inside of the draft because their pivots are going to be more meaningful and they still have their responses available to them. Obviously, Taric here is the most likely assumed pick that would be really good against what TSM is showing as a theme right now. But when we enter into the ban phase, FlyQuest, they ban away Zilean. And then Cassio banned away by TSM. Cassio is really good. Because if you think what Cassio could end up doing on like R4 or R5, if TSM continues to draft heavy emphasis, hard engage type champions and whatnot, Cassio, you always hear Nemesis say that she's settled the wreckage, you know. I mean, he's referred to this card I think even in interviews or whatnot. Exile all attacking creatures target player controls. So Cassio's really good against short range, hard emphasis, engaged champions. She absolutely ruins them because she gets to scale for free. She wins the matchups and she transitions better than so many fucking different champions. And then we move into the next bans. We have Taric obviously getting banned away. I think that's obviously a smart ban because FlyQuest, they already should have taken it on R3. I don't know why they opted for Pantheon. Like, there was some sort of sense of urgency that you needed to get Pantheon early. But you don't need to get Pantheon early because he's never going to be focused, right? I can't imagine that they would ever focus him. And if you're worried about the enemy team picking him on B4 or like B5 or something, well, first off, you could have picked Pantheon on R4. You could have stolen away, or not stolen away, but you could have taken Taric before it would end up getting banned away. You could have had more champions open that maybe they obviously would have to respect or be afraid of. Maybe they wouldn't even think of Cassiopeia or something like that, because maybe they're thinking Cassio because they think Pantheon's going to go into the jungle. There's a lot of stuff happening. Zilean versus next band ends up being the Azir. The thing is that obviously Azir would be problematic if they pick it B4, B5. You do have reach onto Azir, but now your Kalista would obviously be less valuable. Azir is really good against all these champions. So interestingly enough, we've both recognized champions that are really good against the ones that we've already picked, but still people don't always draft on theme. Additionally, the Azir could have came in on R4. Pantheon would be able to play more power hungry inside of the jungle because Azir can do basically everything. Azir can push, can always get prio, he can go even in basically any lane, he can pull lanes depending on like what his jungler wants to achieve. Azir's very flexible, which is why he's in the meta. The thing is that if Azir comes in on R4, they can respond to Azir with like Veigar. And Veigar, it would end up annihilating all the champions on the red team and stuff. So I guess Azir actually can't come in until R5. I don't think that FlyQuest is considering this at all. That like this is a real sequence of events. I really don't think that FlyQuest is entertaining this, or that like something like Xerath is also really good. Even though Pantheon can reach Xerath, you still have the jungle pick that has yet to come in. So like things like that. I don't think that this stuff is being entertained at all. But it's interesting to note. So now at this point, they ban away the Azir, and FlyQuest they pick the Blitzcrank. Now the Blitzcrank is okay. It has value against all of these champions. It also is really good if they try to pivot away from the mono red like theme, and it's really good. In general, in this spot, Blitz is okay. Obviously, there's other support champions that you could pick, like mages or whatnot, or like, you know, off mages or whatever. You could pick Poppy support with Kalista would be really good. Like, if this ends up being like Poppy, Poppy is really strong here. I would say that Shen is even really strong here with your team composition. I think it has insane synergy. It's also really good at reaching if they try to go for like a control champion. Lots of synergy with Pantheon at trying to reach that champion. Lots of value being able to be pokeballed by like Kalista and whatnot. And it lets you actually continue to go into another mage on R5 and then try to edge out the draft with a victory. So like Poppy is really good. Shen's really good. Blitzcrank is acceptable. So that's mostly what you're looking for. So FlyQuest picks the Blitz. I don't like the Blitz the most, but it is important to note that he is still pretty okay against options that the enemy team could pivot into. TSM then goes full fucking sinner. They pick Elise to go with the Renekton, and then they pick a Sylas. And the Sylas is coming in blind. So the Sylas is able to get answered. FlyQuest end up answering Leblanc. Now, the thing about the Sylas that's really weird is there's still so many champions remaining on the enemy team that can come in as like counter picks to everything that they just drafted right here. And that's where stuff gets really bad. Like even Ryze here is actually really good against enemy team. Like we want to talk about like a Ryze spot when Ryze normally should never be able to exist. And this is definitely one of the Ryze spots. Karma is also really good in a spot like this. Karma is super effective in this instance. You could even move the Aatrox into you can move the Aatrox into mid lane against the Sylas and then counterpick the Renekton. That would be another option that you could end up going. So the thing is that these two champions, when they come in, doesn't account for all the pivots that can continue to exist. Like Aatrox could go mid, and then Kalista could just go top against Renekton. That's a nightmare. You could now obviously you're sort of you would need a really heavy hitting mage on R5, or you would need an AP. Like heavy AP damage dealing AD carry, or you would need a mage to come in on R5 to go up against Xayah and Rakan. Syndra's obviously banned away, so you could go Veigar, but then Veigar Blitz is like kind of weird as a combo. You could go Vel'Koz, but no one's gonna play Vel'Koz, so that's already a problem as well. So these are the things that we're looking at. You could go Soraka ADC. With Blitzcrank, some people would probably say that. I mean, I would say that's very high variance. Soraka is still playable, even if people don't pick her, and it's sort of like whatever. Swain would actually be enabled by the enemy team, but the thing is that you give the Sylas actually a pretty well. No, wait, Sylas doesn't get soul fragments, right? So it's actually kind of weak. So maybe Swain is actually okay. AP Kaisa is an option that you could end up picking, even though she doesn't have access to like the backline and whatnot. AP Kaisa would be really good in terms of like magic damage, and then you just rely on the Blitzcrank. And because the enemy doesn't have any sort of poke or siege, like how does this team composition end without dragons or Baron? They can't. There's never a way to end without Barons or Dragon. There is just no universe that it's possible. So, like, R5 has so many options. That's the problem with TSM's draft, is that B4, B5 leaves them susceptible to so many different pivots that there's no way that they're accounting for. I mean, okay, even if FlyQuest can't do it, it doesn't change the fact that it exists, okay? Yeah, I mean, well, Talia less so down in bot lane with Blitz. I understand that you have like, I mean, you could send Aatrox or Pantheon into jungle and whatnot, but then you just keep Kalista down in bot lane. Well, I mean, I guess you could no, actually no. The more I think about it, no, that just doesn't even make sense. And part of the problem with some of the options that FlyQuest would ideally like to find is that they do have the triple AD. That's already present, so ideally you're looking for mages and you're looking for champions that doesn't allow the Sylas to really get all that much value. So they end up going for the Leblanc, which is like, it's fine, it has a lot of value against all the champions on the side of TSM. And if you look at all these champions, Aatrox has all melee hard engaged champs that have to run into him, right? So he's enabled. Kalista scales inherently beyond just like 2.5 items because everyone's melee and has to run into her. So she has insane amounts of value. No one on this team is probably going to get any sort of like grievous wounds to hurt like Runon's Hurricane or whatnot. And that's super niche to even end up talking about. Pantheon has insane value against all of these champions as well. Obviously Sylas and Sylas and Renekton can end up getting some armor and whatnot. But even as a low economy champion, he'll deal some damage. He has more options available to them, and they can definitely do a lot more trickery. Blitzcrank, insane value against all 5 of these champions. Basically able to just sort of delete anyone on the enemy team. Leblanc in a vacuum answers the Sylas. Leblanc able to answer everything. So the thing is I believe when I was talking about this on stream, I did say that TSM lost this draft. And they lose it for other reasons, right? They lose it because they drafted champions face up, giving their opponents lots and lots of options to punish it further. LeBlanc ends up coming in, and if we assume how all of these laning phases go out, obviously, Renekton Elise is not the be-all, end-all of top jungle duo, right? If it was, you would see it every single game. But the thing is and I've heard it way too many times from like top laners, like things happen behind the scenes, okay? And you'll hear a top laner say like, Renekton Elise is OP, and then they'll lose with Renekton Elise, and they will blame a million things. Someone's saying. So that's pretty much it. For like this draft. This team knows. Okay, Elise Renekton has to gank you. Now, one of the things that TSM does have going for it is that no one will itemize against Elise, and no one will itemize against Sylas until later stages of the game. But the thing is that that Renekton and Elise will try to gank you. You know that they'll try to pressure you, yada, 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 right? You know all of this is coming. So as professional players, there are ways to play around it. And then you ask yourself the question, well, if we play around it and we end up, let's say that we go slightly behind, is it a big enough victory for TSM? No, it's not, because their champions fall off of a cliff. So the responsibility on TSM's champions to get ahead, to get these advantages, to do all of this shit, it's impossible. It's really, really, really hard when the enemy team knows that this is all coming. And Renekton Elise, oftentimes, like, I remember seeing Renekton at Worlds, right? And Nemesis and I, we would always fucking laugh about it and whatnot. Most of the time, Renekton Elise wouldn't do anything that you've been led to believe that Renekton Elise will do. And as professional players, if you can't manipulate lane states or account for early game openings and whatnot to not just fall, behind so that your champion's able to be worth more, then you have a problem. It's just the way that certain things work. It's sort of like aggro decks like Murlocs or like Zulok or something, but the stats aren't actually there to justify it. And if you go and look at like the win rates of certain aggro decks, you'll see that they're probably below. Well, I remember there was a stat, I can't remember what MTG block it was, but basically Mono Red had like upwards of, I don't know, 70%, or it had like something, it had something unholy. It had an absolutely ridiculously unholy win rate at lower MMRs and like casual. But against pro play, it was sub 50, which was, I mean, just it's the same thing. Renekton Elise is a sub 50 combo. It's absolutely a sub 50 combo. And when you're professional players and you're playing against it and your champions are worth more in the later stages, you acknowledge that. And whatever you want to do or whatever you feel like you should do suddenly stops existing, and your only job is about preventing it out of the opponent. So this isn't the hardest punish that FlyQuest could have had with LeBlanc on R5, but the problem still remains that TSM drafted in a way that allowed them to get completely guillotined in the draft on R5. They let themselves potentially get pummeled by R3 Taric. If that would end up happening, like R3 Taric would really ruin them, because then this creates even more problems. In the draft phase, you know, like you can ban out whatever, like I don't know, I don't even know what they would ban out at this point. What would they ban if not for Taric? Maybe they ban Nautilus, maybe they ban Leona. I don't know. Well, what the fuck? I'm blanking. I already selected R3 Taric. What would they even ban out? I don't even know what they would ban. It just feels like there's no ban that's really meaningful here that isn't just targeting the opponent, right? Because again, Aatrox, Kalista, they can be pivoted top lane. Now. Another thing that's really weird is like Karthus is almost sort of enabled, depending on well, Karthus would have to come in on R4, and then they would have to respond with AD champion on R5, and that would sort of be interesting. But the Karthus and the Taric is a bit peculiar. Poppy is able to be picked on R4 or R5, and then again you need a big mage inside of the jungle. So there's so many options available with Taric on R3. There's a lot of interesting things that you can do on R4 or R5. All right, I'll ban away another mage, I guess. I don't know. I'll ban Orianna. Okay, I'll ban Ori. Right? Okay, so we ban Orianna, and now we need jungle. So at this point you need jungle to come in. So if you're FlyQuest, Gragas is obviously on the table as an available pick. You could Poppy jungle, but that can be responded to. You could sort of Sejuani, but not really. Sejuani would not be most ideal for like champions that you would want to pick on R5. You know what? Here, let's do this. Let's say that they go Pantheon on R4, right? Let's say that they go Pantheon jungle on R4. Let's say that these champions still come in on B4, B5, right? So this is still the series of events that are unfolding, right? So now you can just rise, and everything's totally fine. You can Diana in this spot. Yeah, you can Diana against this team composition, and it's on theme with what you're doing, and it's bigger than the opponent's. Like, your hard engage, your brawliness is so much better than the opponent's. You could Galio you could Galio. Galio I don't think is super ideal. I think Rise is really good. I think Diana is super, super good in this spot. I think both of those champions are super, super nice. You don't have AD options available to you anymore because you need magic damage to come in on your team comp without compromising yourself all that much. You could Nico. I know that Nico hype was sort of existing for a little while. You cannot Cho'Gath against Sylas. You are actually inting. You are completely inting if you try to Cho'Gath versus Sylas. You can't Kayle. Kayle is not an option. Lissandra is almost an option. I would say that Lissandra's pretty thin. I think that Karma is fantastic. I think Karma is super, super, super good here. Karma's obviously fine. Anivia into Sylas is sort of like whatever. Anivia, I would say that Anivia is not bad by any means either. I think all of those champions are pretty good. And then when you start to entertain like pivots and whatnot, like sending. So let's say that Pantheon's in jungle, and you have this, and you would do something like this, right? Then you start to get mages down in bot lane that would end up being pretty good, or any kind of mages or AP damage champions down in bot. I mean, you could do the I guess you could do the. So if you're willing to go behind and bot a little bit, you could pick up like Cog in a spot like this in terms of like magic damage. This would be another like spot where Soraka's really good as well. I think that this is a lot safer of a spot for Soraka, where her brawliness would be really rewarded. Cog is fine. Ezreal, if you go Leandri's third item for magic damage, and then you go like Gunblade and Zanya's and whatnot, I think that would be that would be okay, depending on, again, what you're okay with. I don't think... I mean, you could Ziggs. You could Ziggs on R4, R5, and then Ziggs is sort of like your poke object against the opponents as well. Heimerdinger would be... I mean, Heimer's interesting too. But basically, what I'm trying to express is, like, I'm trying to just show all the options that you would have available to you, so that you guys can see, like, what is possible inside of this draft, and why it makes certain champion choices, again, weak at certain points. Because then all of these champions that we just ended up listing, it ends up neutralizing or just choking out the champions. And you're able to do this because everything's face up. You're able to do this because it's pretty free. Now, if you had something different, so let's do this, right? So let's say that you had Taric on R3, and you want to do something a little bit different in terms of, like, getting some sort of, like, AD, right? You could go Gragas, and then the opponents, let's say that they do Elise, and then they do Sylas, right? Well, now a champion recommendation from earlier suddenly becomes a little bit better. You could have Quinn, right, with, like, cleanse and whatnot, and now you even have extra added value against the opposing team composition. Gragas gets to deal true damage against the opponents with Sork plus Oblivion. You can break apart the enemy team composition. It's another ultimate. I mean, ultimates on your side aren't really, like, the end of the world by any means. Sylas is going to have a really hard time this game. Kalista continues. So there's a lot of stuff, and all of these options, you have to sort of, like, weigh through the pieces. And this is why I think one of the things that we're going to, again, I'm going to do on stream later this week, we're going to have some of the Fnatic members hopefully come on. I know Nemesis will. I know Nemesis and Whippo will. I don't know about if I can get Selfmade. Selfmade will probably just meme, but I don't know. And then we'll have some other LEC pros join as well, and we'll have, like, a Discord call using this website on, like, share screen. We'll go through a lot of different drafts and talk about different things. Because I think drafting is a really underdeveloped thing that exists in League right now, and I think that it's going to start meaning more and more, and it's really hard to learn about drafting, because to draft, you have to understand the champions' matchups, how they work cohesively, what they're trying to achieve, what are they weak to, what are they prone to in terms of, like, future picks, and can future picks actually end up making them very awkward. Do you guys remember the Fnatic, it was one of Fnatic's losses, right? Hold on. Fnatic match history. It was really weird. Yeah, they're not robots, which is that sentence, everyone likes to say it to me, it's ironic, because the whole point is that they're not robots. That's the whole point. And the people that say that to me are fucking morons, because they don't even realize that I'm advocating for things that are more human than robotic. Okay? When a team composition has to manipulate lanes, out-micro you, out-control you in team fights, perform better, hit skill shots, coordinate vision control, and all these other things, and all you have to do is sit back, relax, and then come online, scale, and then beat them? Yeah, I guess they're not robots, you're right. Thank you. Thank you for unironically fucking proving my point. Goddamn morons. I think it was one of the games that Fnatic lost. Where is it? It was pretty early in the split, right? Because we flamed Nemesis. It was yes. Yes, here it is. Here it is, right? This is it. The fucking Rise pick. Beautiful. Beautiful. The Rise was awful. So I think what how do I get the VOD here? How do I where can I see the VOD? Okay, where is it? Remember, we went over this with Nemesis on stream. So let's go over this. This is the way that a jungle pick can suffocate, like, your mid laner, or it can suffocate your top laner, or it can suffocate your AD later in the game. Lee Sin. And you guys noticed, right? Lee died, right? You guys remember when there was the front page Reddit thread of Rush flaming me when Lee and Elise was everywhere? And I said they were fucking dog shit champions? Lee died. Lee's dead. Lee is fucking... He's gone. He's just Sometimes he still gets picked, and every single time you see him, he does fucking nothing. In every goddamn league, he does pretty much nothing. Not in solo queue, but I wasn't talking about solo queue. I was talking about fucking competitive. And as time went on, Lee started to die. You know what other champion almost ended up dying? Aatrox almost ended up dying. Aatrox almost went off a fucking cliff as well. But there were so many players on fucking Twitter and stuff that were trying to defend Lee and Elise as champions. And Gangplank comes in. So Gangplank surrenders the laning phase, self-counterpick. Gangplank loses to Set, but Set is... At this point in time, he's only dual flex. He's only able to go mid and top, or at least that's the way that he was inside of the meta. Obviously, he was able to go support as well. On R4. Okay. So, Veigar isn't good enough here because Veigar can be answered. I remember we talked about this with the Lemon on stream as well. Veigar can't come in. Okay, so now you end up selecting Nautilus because again, at this point, like more or better champion picks weren't being picked yet, at least down in the support role. This was during the time of like Leona, Braum, Nautilus, etc. Right now, if you are Nemesis, what champion do you have to pick here? There's not many. There's not a lot of champs that you can pick. That is not just off theme with Elise. That's not off theme with Set and Nautilus and whatnot. You could make the argument for Azir, but you notice that Azir is still weak. Azir is still weak against Gangplank. Azir is still weak against MF. So things are really weird here. So I believe I told him at the time. So he ends up going Rise. But the problem is you guys can realize that a lot of mid lane champions that you would like to pick aren't possible because of Elise. So many mid lane champions you can't pick because of Elise. Or you could pick the mid lane champion, but then you hurt the Elise. So there's a limited amount of options that you can actually go for against the opponent, and most of them are going to be, Orianna, Corki, and Anivia are sort of the picks that you can do. Orianna, Corki, and Anivia. Now, Corki hurts... actually, no, I'm sorry. You can't even Corki. What the fuck am I saying? You can't even Corki, because you have fucking Elise. So you have Orianna, you have Anivia. Wow, awesome. You have Anivia and Orianna. Diana's not possible. Enemy team likes Diana. Twisted Fate's not possible. Garbage. What? You can't pick Rise. Rise makes you so weak against the entire enemy team. You can't pick Xerath. Off theme with... I mean, you could pick Xerath, but then you get countered. It has to be a champion that can, for the most part, not get completely fucking crushed. The other thing is that Xerath's really weak against MF. Xerath's really... Xerath's not weak against MF. Xerath is weak against Gangplank, and Xerath is off theme with some of the champions on Fnatic. Leblanc is not great at all. What are you saying? Why LeBlanc? You want to go to 2 items and then fucking kill yourself, or what? You want to pick LeBlanc and then do fucking nothing and get countered? Like, okay, yeah, cool. All right, yeah. Hold on, let me play. Where the LeBlanc's banned, right? Let me give you LeBlanc. Okay, wow. Here, wow. We gonna surrender yet or what? We surrendering? Yeah, I know that it's banned, but I just wanna fucking, yeah, a really good LeBlanc pick. Thank you so much. Wow, that was fantastic. Yeah, the options are limited. Orianna and Anivia aren't good, but they're basically all that you can do without just taking an individual champion and then trying to carry on your own accord. And what I want to show you here is the problem that a champion elsewhere in the draft can cause another champion later on. Stop. Kiana's fucking awful. You guys aren't getting the point. Red team knows that you have to get ahead. And if you don't get ahead, you lose. You can't win anywhere. You can't win any lane. You can't get ahead. You can't engage. They outscale you. Their champions are worth more. Corki's bad in the Fnatic draft because why do you have Corki and Elise together? Corki has no setup for Elise. What is Corki granting Elise? Why do you have Elise in the draft? Why is Elise just not Gragas? Well, Gragas is banned away. Why is Elise and Corki together? They're trying to do totally different things in the game. Elise is not a good enough champion to justify just blanketly... okay, so the term is splashing. Splash is a term when you throw a champion in, or like a card in, that is not on theme with the rest of the deck. And ultimately, these are cards, right? These are basically just cards, which is why I try to use so many TCG analogies. Kled, I mean, yeah, you can... Alright, so look, here... God damn it, I hate this content, I guess. I don't know. You're not getting the point. If you suggest Kled, same problem. Enemy team knows that you have to get ahead. They can pick another champion that outscales you and beats you simultaneously. It's the whole point of what we're trying to discuss, is that the game is slated in the enemy's favor. They have less responsibility. They have less of an ask. All they have to do is go even and you lose. And if you ask either player to talk about either side of the coin, they're of course going to say, the set player is going to say, of course I can beat GP, or I can get ahead of GP, I can still ball out of control. But if the same player was Gangplank in the very same draft, he would say, it's fine. I might, I might lose lane, but I'll scale up, and then I'll be worth more. Both can't be true! Well, I mean, both can be true from the player's perspective, but clearly there's something that is devoid of the player, which is the natural tendency of the matchup and what is likely to end up occurring. Now, sometimes you can pick whatever and you can win, right? Cloud9 right now, they can pick whatever the fuck they want, they could win. Right? It doesn't matter. At least the way that stuff currently stands. Okay? They can pick whatever the fuck they want, but that doesn't make it okay. But doesn't getting ahead come from the Elise pick, so you already have committed to it? What do you mean? Yes, Silent Twitch 9, which is why if you pivot away from that, it's counterintuitive to what you're trying to achieve. Mal's or Veigar with Elise? What? No, we can't pick Mal's or Veigar blind! No! You can't pick Mal's or Veigar blind. There's way too many champions that just answer him, and you end up losing. You can't do it. You splash cards when the card is overtuned. You can splash a card when it's completely overtuned. A champion. Well, let me think of an aggressive champion that was really overtuned. Release Aatrox. You guys remember, or like the post first buffed Aatrox on release. Aurelia when she was busted. Camille. You could pick them anytime you want, any fucking time you want. They're just too overtuned. They're too overtuned that even the type of champions or team compositions that should be able to answer them can't. Old Kassadin, yeah. Splashing is not flexing picks. Splashing is selecting a champion that is very off theme with the rest of the comp, but its stats make up for it. What do you think of Ornn? I mean, I think Ornn's still really good, obviously. I think Ornn is really, really good. So anyways, let's go into TSM's final draft. Okay, so we just did Set, Aatrox, so already out the gate by TSM. Set is better than Aatrox. Set reaches Aphelios. So Set is also multi-flex. Set can go, he can go top, he can go mid and support, and to a lesser extent jungle. I think he's garbage inside of the jungle. But no matter what, this is already losing. This is already a losing line, and what we've established elsewhere is that they believe this is a strong line. This is a fucking bad line. This is a really, really, really bad line. This is losing. I can show you how to strap something on 6 ways from Sunday to punish this kind of an opening, but that doesn't matter. It's a garbage R1, R2, leaves themselves prone to so many things, commits them to one style. So Varus and Thresh. And this obviously retains Set flex mid-top. Obviously you could take jungle here. This could be Gragas, and then that retains Set triflex. So that's something that's happening inside of the draft, even without it being explicitly stated. But anyways, they do Thresh. I think Thresh is one of the best actual blind champions. I think that he's less punishable than, say, something like Nautilus. in terms of like a tank or like an engage support type thingy-majiggy. So that's pretty much all that's going on there. And then they handshake it with Nautilus, so they're not looking for any value there. So as it stands right now, this is winning for FlyQuest. And the reason that it's winning for FlyQuest, again, just like in the previous drafts, emphasis hard engage, short range, again, can get neutralized later on inside of the draft. And if you move away from it on R4, R5, then you end up harming your own champions. We move into the ban phase here. And now they've picked up certain things, apparently, in between games. They now ban away Trundle, and then they ban away Jarvan. And, you know, interestingly enough, the Jarvan, if, you know, they picked it with another, like, hard engage champion, then you could actually respond on, well, I mean, you can respond on R5 to what is happening. Zoe banned away, sorry, and Leblanc banned away. And the Leblanc ban, once again, by Fly, doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But it doesn't not really matter. TSM did not win this draft. Sejuani gets picked early. So, already, yet again, there's issues. Because now, hard engage, well, not hard engage, but engage, short range, no other options. And if you pivot away on R4 to like a ranged champion, your Aatrox is dead weight, which means that you're playing with 4 champions and you just have a meat shield of a corpse up in top lane. So anyways, it goes over to enemy team, and they just go Azir and Olaf, and so they're playing for like they're playing a more aggressive kind of game. Now let me just go over. All right, so I'll finish this up with Echo. So the Echo ends up coming in as well, and so TSM. The Echo has options in the later stages, but one of the things, again, that you notice, hard engage, or well, not Aphelios, hard engage, can't really split push, because, again, they're on red team, which means that they're never going to be able to do anything against the triangle. Okay, triangle, really important. So they're never going to be able to do anything against the triangle, because a carry is always going to be in close proximity to Baron. This team composition will always fall behind, because they have, like, even/losing top lane in terms of priority. Azir able to do whatever inside of the mid lane. And then they have Aphelios and Nautilus on bot side, so things are already rough, even in that regard. So the Olaf is the one that gets to pressure everything early on in terms of, like, Drakes and whatnot. Gets outscaled, can't do anything because of Azir, completely controls him, as well as Thresh, can't reliably engage onto the enemy team, all the pressure onto Echo. Echo suffers from the same exact thing as red side Kennen. I don't know where all the champions are right now. But what's going to end up happening is, just like red side Kennen cannot find any ways into this area to do anything in terms of a flank. So as long as the blue team always maintains the phalanx, it doesn't matter that the Olaf is a shit fucking champion. The Azir and the Varus will basically carry every single fight, because Azir is more of a threat to all 5 of the champions on the side of TSM than any of TSM's champions are to threatening the defensiveness of the FlyQuest champions. So they are free to scale up massively. What that ends up meaning is that Azir gets to coast to 3-4 items pretty much for free, because they have the luxury of having all the early dragons. It means that they also buy themselves free time to go to like 30-35 minutes. And again, this is assumed natural tendencies that can end up unfolding. Now, if you would want a bit of a different champion that could like beat Azir, and then also have some value against some of the other champions, you could have like Xerath, because there's not basically any form of CC, there's nothing to really threaten Xerath. So if you have the Xerath here, you end up realizing pretty quickly that the Aatrox sucks. The Aatrox is a meat shield, which means that he's off theme with the team composition, and you had to pivot Xerath on R5 in order to find value in this game. No matter what, it's still shitty, and you identify really quickly that Aatrox sucks. You can't pick Veigar, because Veigar doesn't have enough value, even though he has he has good power against the the set and the Azir, but he's weak to other things inside of the team comp. You can end up picking the Orianna, but Orianna still suffers from problems herself, but I think that she's a lot better than Echo, for instance. So let's just keep going down the list of champions. You could pick Victor or something, but yet again, Victor off theme with the Aatrox, so Victor's already a problem. You could pick Vel'Koz. I think Vel'Koz is in the same boat as Xerath. Yet again, Aatrox is a problem. And it's not that you can't pick these champions at this point, it's that why the fuck do you have Aatrox? And that's all that I'm really trying to emphasize right now. The other problem is that even when you do pick these champions, it becomes very similar to game number 1 and game number 2, where it's basically Victor versus the world in those games. And all of this really sucks. Now, is there ways for either of these two teams to play out the game, regardless of the drafts, and still find victories and stuff? Yeah, sure, too. Yeah, I mean, you know, variance happens. What is the likeliness, or what is the likelihood of lanes going in certain ways? And everything is likely to favor FlyQuest. If you run the simulation over and over and over, and you have one team, basically, if you could have it so that they could play against themselves, they much rather have FlyQuest. They would much rather have FlyQuest's draft. Because, again, the ask is lower on FlyQuest's draft. Everything that they have to do is much more streamlined and straightforward. It's infinitely easier to pilot the mid and late transition, and they scale up way better than their opponents. So all of a sudden, inaction is action. Because by doing nothing, you're actually just... you're snowballing ahead. Yeah, it doesn't matter. You can Lux, you can Xerath, you can Vel'Koz. You can do so many things on R5, and all of them are just really weak because it means that there's not a whole lot going on with your Aatrox. You can't like Lulu, you can't do anything like Kale or anything in that regard. If you Corki, I mean, Corki is maybe one of the picks that is like somewhat okay. But like Aatrox, he's still dead weight. Like Corki, in regards to Xerath and Vel'Koz and whatnot, I think that Corki has some different nuances that are available to him. Vladimir is on theme with Aatrox, but Vladimir isn't achieving anything. And now Vladimir is also harming other champions inside of the draft, like the Sejuani and like the Nautilus. So things get really problematic. Also, it's very easy for this team composition to itemize if you pick Vlad. Even though I would agree with you that Vladimir is more okay with Aatrox than a lot of the other champions. Twisted Fate's not good. Twisted Fate gets absolutely annihilated. Karma's not good. Karma suffers the same fate. Karma is an all-in-y kind of champion. Karma is an all-in-y kind of champion that would have some value with the Aatrox, but not enough. By any means. Can't choose Rise. Again, you can't choose like long range scaling types of champions. You could, I guess you could choose Zilean, but the problem is that it becomes Zilean versus Azir, and it favors Azir. This is really similar to another draft that we ended up having. So there's a lot of problems with the draft, and if you realize what's causing the problems, it's the Sejuani on R4, and then it's the Aatrox on R1, and then it's also the tendency of Nautilus not really functioning with a lot of different expected transitions. You know, depending on like what champion you have, he's just going to be dead weight really fast. Oh, okay, Boomer, thank you so much. Ahri's not good. Same problem. Yeah, Renekton. Why didn't I think of that? Why didn't I think of that? Look, you can have any control mage that you want, okay? It's not that these champions are necessarily bad against some of the champs on the side of FlyQuest, okay? You can have Ziggs, you can have Xerath, okay? You can have Vel'Koz. You can have Vel'Koz come in on R5. Problem is that the one champion is trying to fight versus everything, and that the Aatrox is dead weight, and that the Nautilus is dead weight, and that a lot of these control mages have they harm themselves because of the Nautilus and the Sejuani, because of the way that the enemy champion can end up itemizing later. Now, the other thing about like the R4 pick that is so bizarre is that there's other punishes that are even available. Like you could go Ivern. You could go Ivern against Sejuani. You could go Kayn against Sejuani, and then choose another champion. Like Rost is gonna ruin everyone's life on this team composition. Rost even has a lot of value in the early stages of the game. Like there's so many things that are happening when you lock in the Sejuani. Rost is really good. Ivern's really good. I mean Olaf is I hate saying the word stylistic preference, but it definitely is, because of what you can expect to happen in the early stages. Gragas obviously still available as well. Gragas really harms like control mages, even if you would try going into it. Like there's way too many things that are happening when you lock the Sejuani. Kosidin's gonna get... Or Kosidin, his... Alright, look. You lose the game before it even starts. Kosidin can never get to the later stages. And even when he does, he doesn't have a ton of freedom to jump in. There's more than enough ways to CC and lock Kosidin down once he's on top of the enemy team, or if he tries to engage. And then he gets itemized against later. You're incentivizing magic resistance in the later stages. Olaf instead of Sedge. Olaf instead of Sedge suffers the same problems. Now, this team composition, I mean, now this one's going to try to play for early game, but what, you're going to choose a control mage on R5? Okay, great. Now, you know what? Here, ready? Let's give the red team 4,000 gold advantage at 20 minutes, right? I'll humor you. Okay, let's say we give red team 4,000 gold at here. We'll even continue to pick like on theme with NA. We'll give the red team 4,000 gold at 20 minutes. What does that actually mean? Not a lot. Not a lot. It's gonna come down to Azir versus Orianna, but the Gragas is way more valuable than the Olaf. The set is going to outscale everyone on the enemy team. The set has reach against everyone on the enemy team. The set protects the Varus and the Azir way better than anything else. Graves R4? Okay, well, we can keep running different spots. Now, Graves has, I guess, a little bit more value, but Graves is still short-ranged. So there's still a lot of stuff that's going on. Could you blind Cassio here? No, because then actually you get value out of Graves being out of Graves Q, or well, Graves would be a little bit better actually against Cassiopeia if a control mage came in on R4. But yeah, I mean Graves gets annihilated by Azir. Now if you pick Azir, let's say that TSM picks Azir here. What jungle do you pick? Everything's losing. Can't pick mage junglers. You can't do anything. And even though there's not like Gragas just opens up so many things. Everything's losing. No, Kindred's not ideal. Kindred's not ideal. Take it away, Valdez. Doesn't matter if Dardoch doesn't play Kindred or Poppy jungle or set jungle or whatever. Point is that you can, and it's not hard. The trade-off is infinitely better for how the champion slots in against the enemy teams, and thematically, like how they coordinate with each other and whatnot. Not mid and choose other support. Alright, let's try that. Ready? You just pick long-range mages again. And it's the same problem. Because there's no jungle. There's no jungle. There's no jungle that comes in here as a counter pick that is actually worthwhile. Now, there's other junglers that I think aren't being picked at all. Like Shen jungle, I think is actually good. I think Shen jungle is playable. I know that sounds really weird. Zac is terrible. Come on. You get free scaling in mid lane now against Nautilus. You can just choose Corki. If you know this to be the case, whether it's Nautilus or Morgana, you can just choose Corki, and then I guess Gragas. Either of those would be fine. I mean, you can also just take Poppy too. You could do this. Alternatively, you could go GP and then throw set in jungle, even though it's shitty, but whatever. I just want to talk about the possibility of it. Hi XD Daddy, thank you for 18 months. Anyways, so this was pretty much the TSM draft problems. Let's just outline some stuff, right? Responsibility, right? Ask. This is one of the things. How hard is it? Wait, who has the onus in the game? This is a problem with the draft, right? Off-theme champions trying to do different things at different points, right? That's another problem. Like we saw the Victor pivot was really big in a lot of games. Well, game 1 and 2, and then we saw in the other game the Zilean and the Aurelia, and it's not it's not about if teams can win with losing drafts, because teams do win with losing drafts sometimes. I mean, just fucking take a look at fucking T1 ruining my fucking. Take a look at T1 ruining my life. T1 Genji, like, this sucks, man. I was 80%. I was 80% until Genji, the Genji nation attacked. I dropped under 80%, but this is over almost a 200 game sample size. 92% week 5, 88% week 6, 95% right week 4, 69. Let's not talk about week 3. 72, 77. And if you go through here, it's not always choosing the winning. It's not always choosing the winning team, which is why I think that this is a really important document. And if you guys remember, at Worlds, I peaked at 83% over, I think, a 60 game sample size. And then I finished, I think, 78%. I finished like 78 or 77% throughout all of Worlds. I don't know. Obviously, I'll track this for summer too. I've been very adamant about the drafts mean less when there is like massive team discrepancy. I did show what could be picked instead of Aatrox. Champions like GP are really good. GP should be way higher priority. Ornn should be really high priority. Maokai is really good. Zactop is really good in certain spots. Malphite is actually good in certain spots. Do I think Dardoch is... No, I don't think so. So, like, the thing is like, here, let's take one of their... This is okay. I mean, if you know that the opponents won't take Aphelios, I mean, no, Aphelios is still weak. It's too early. This is fine. Syndra's banned away. You shouldn't have banned Syndra. I mean, you also don't need to ban, like, look, if they do something like this, like that. All right, look, if they first pick Rakan, you could just do Ornn. But I'll show you something that isn't Ornn. Okay, so we'll do a variation that's not Ornn. Syndra doesn't need to be banned, but we could ban Syndra if you really wanted to. So we can do Draven, and then we could do if you wanna pick AD, you could do something like Varus, because he has multiple modes. He can be flex mid against Azir, right? If they do something like Ornn and they do something like Xayah, then you could do Kindred, right, on R3. Now, generally, you'd probably want to wait more to get Kindred because the opponents will waste bans. But at the same sense, you have Varus flex, and you could choose mages in the support role. So like Kindred's really good. And then you go into the ban phase here, and Ornn is gonna always just be considered dual flex. And all that you want to do here is you want to try to control the skies, so to speak. So you could ban away Azir. I mean, you could also allow the Azir, I guess, to get picked if you wanna counter him. But I would much rather control everything for the most part. In terms of like the sky, or like we could ban away Corki here. You could ban Corki if you want, and then right here you go a standard mid laner that just controls stuff, and then you reserve counter pick for mage support. That would be fine too. Alternatively, you can just counter the Rakan right now because you don't know what they'll end up banning. Well, because these bans wouldn't be utilized. So you could just choose answer right now. Obviously, Zilean is really good, so you could choose Zilean. That's even more flex. So you have Kindred Zilean. That's something that's going on. And then I don't even know what the opponents would even try to pick at this point. They're not gonna put Ornn in. They're gonna keep Ornn up in top, but he's already ruined. So it doesn't really matter what they do on B4, B5. You just have too many options. Now let's say that Zilean did get banned away. Then okay, so Zilean gets banned away. I mean, alternatively, you could take Azir. You don't have to ban it away. You would just have to ban something that would answer it. Now, if the opponents can play Veigar, you would probably ban Veigar, you know, or I mean, if they can play both Veigar and Azir, then I think that you're always just going to be doing support R4, no matter what, especially because it does, like, you also have value with Varus pivot mid, so that's sort of whatever. But the thing is that if you do support R4, then I think Azir ban makes a lot of sense, just in general, because support R4, you're getting limited amounts of value out of it. So let's say that Zilean is banned away. You could do Bard. I think Bard would probably be fine down there with Varus. You could do Zyra, and then stand your ground, and then still reserve counterpick for Mage on R5. Like, there's a lot of options, and again, all of them have to account for what the opponents are trying to do. The Kindred and the Gangplank are already invalidating what Ornn is trying to attempt to do. So this is one of the ways to neutralize Ornn inside of the draft phase. No, not until a mid pick. Lux support, I mean, you could Lux support, but Lux support, I think is worse than Zyra. And this, I think Zyra and Bard are both better than Lux. I think that Taric is also okay as well. I think that you could Taric. I think that you can also Zac. I think you can Zac support R4. And then that gives you Zac inside of the jungle, depending on what they pick. So, like, we're looking for champions that they conceal a lot of, or, well, no. I mean, you can't, oh, never mind. You can't Zac support unless you would Kindred AD carry. Which, Kindred AD carry is actually okay. So if you're willing to send Varus mid, and then Zac jungle, and then Kindred AD, this does get a little bit, I mean, this is really wonky. But it's obviously not super ideal. So, like, Zac probably, that's not really going to be a consideration. I know it's played in China. Kindred AD is definitely doable. It's just not the kind of victory that one would like. So I think that realistically here, you're looking at like Taric on R4, and then they choose whatever, and then you answer it on R5. And you're accounting for so many angles. You've already neutered all three of these champions with this, and this. Like all of your champs agree with each other. They like what they're trying to do. They like what the enemy team is trying to throw at them. You're winning top lane. You're winning bot lane. Your jungle matchup is going to get some help on R5. Like, now the thing that's unfortunate. I mean, alternatively, I mean, you could actually Azir. You could Azir here and then Taric on R5. That would be another option. I think that accounts for a lot of angles. Can they Veigar? No, they can't. Well, they can. They could Veigar. They could. Well, no, I guess you would ban away Veigar if you were intending to take this. I think that actually you would prefer to lock them into Corki, more than you would prefer to allow them to have Veigar Xerath. So I think that this line is more winning, and I think that it has to just be evaluated in regards to how winning is a line. So I think this is definitely fine. Yeah, this is fine, I think. You can also flex GP to mid lane, but that depends what you want to do on R4. The whole thing is that you want to make sure that the picks are either really flexible or they can account for every pivot that the opponent is going to try to do while still retaining either your lane dominance and the scaling. I don't care about... It doesn't matter if they can pick Xerath or not. I'm not talking about TSM here, okay? I'm talking about what can you do, okay? So, good player can play Xerath against Azir. Yeah, you could move Ornn jungle, but no one's going to do that. So this is all, you know, this is stuff that is going on. Zilean 5-0 versus Azir? Yeah, I know. It's really, I mean, that's something. But, Zilean's banned here, in this mock draft. LS draft is not just pick scaling. It is account for all of your opponent's options and try to suffocate them as much as possible whilst retaining edges in either lane or scaling. It's not just inherently scaling. I will admit though that I am a bit of a blue-white control player. So, you know. Sometimes though I like to delve into the Dimir, you know, like the little bit of the black-blue. It's totally fine. It is totally fine. Not, you know what, Tolkien? Not a big deal. Is it? Is fine as well. I am a fan of Is it. Okay, any variation of blue in Magic, it's a-okay with me. A-okay with me. Yeah. I think Bant is also really strong right now in LoL. I think Bant's really good. Ban Xerath Azir so you can flex GP mid. No, I mean GP mid flex. I mean, what are you gonna pick up in top lane to get more value against the Ornn? I mean, I guess you could like even Orianna's winning versus GP. So even if they Orianna, it's winning against GP. Zoe's still open. Zoe's winning. Well, Zoe is actually you can beat Zoe with GP. You can beat Zoe with GP. It just really depends. Victor's winning versus GP. Orianna's winning versus GP. Syndra's winning versus GP. Sylas is winning versus GP. Well, Sylas is even, but it's not ideal. And I guess if you do pivot top lane, in this regard, you would probably get something like you could get a Lowy. So if you do ban both of these and then entertain flex for GP top, you could go Alawi. But Alawi would have to come in on R5, so you would do Taric, and then you would go for Alawi. But the problem is that if you do this, you have a very hard time engaging or doing anything super meaningful. So there's still problems inside of the draft, so I don't like it as much. I definitely don't like it as much. What other champions could we actually try to abuse Ornn with if we would pivot? You just actually, no, realistically, you can't really move GP mid. And like, there's no move to GP mid where I think that you would get a big edge by having it. I just really don't think that there's a move. I think that you really want to have access to that range on R5 because it's so good. Like, I guess, I guess one thing that we could do is you can leave both of these open, right? But I feel like Azir is, Azir is okay. If they end up doing something like Azir, I don't know, fucking what, Olaf or something? Like, let's say that they do something like Azir Trundle, right? You can just Veigar. You can Veigar it. You can Xerath it. Like, you can be the one to do this, and this is fine. Like, this is very winning for this team. Even though, like, most people, they're like, wow, Ornn scaling, Xayah scaling, wow, awesome, Azir scaling. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. This comes down to Veigar versus Azir, but he has so much aid coming in from the top lane on Gangplank. And even if Ornn tries to engage, there's too many ways to asphyxiate him. It's really good. Really, really, really good. Really, really valuable. Red side is OP, I think. I think red side's really OP. I think you have to know how to use R4, R5, and then red's really insane. But you need either blind mid or counter support available, I think, to make the most use out of red. Is there a way to see the whole document? I mean, it's just TSM. It's all their drafts throughout the entire split. That's all that it is. It's just all of TSM's drafts. Someone made this to me and tweeted at me on Twitter asking or saying that, you know, I could use it for the discussion. So you can just find it in my mentions on, like, the TSM draft tweet, I think. Shut the fuck up. Oh, okay, thank you. I can't co-cast LPL. Anyways, I hope this was interesting for you guys.